Great. Good afternoon, everyone. I believe it's officially afternoon, sort of. My name is Christine Schlendorf, and I am a professor at Farmingdale State College. I did this research with two student authors, Denise Lopez and Janaya Hips, who are not here today. They had class. But yeah, so I'll tell you a little bit about my research. And what it deals with we looked at open access, using an open access textbook in a classroom versus a commercial digital textbook in the classroom. And we looked at if there was a difference in student performance, access. Did they have access to both the commercial digital book, more access to that one, or the open access? Usage, did they use one more than the other? And then just general textbook purchasing trends that we saw based on a survey. I should just be clear what I mean by open access textbook. These are textbooks that are available free online. For this study, we use the OpenStax and textbook, and we specifically, I'll tell you in a little bit, but we looked at an introductory biology course. The commercial digital textbook is a publisher's book. So we're seeing that, and this kind of goes into the rationale for the study. We're seeing that there is an increasing shift in using commercial, publishers' digital content in higher education. Instead of professors, instructors using traditional textbooks, they're using these digital textbooks that are available for students because we're moving towards the digital world. Plus, though, they are a little bit cheaper, although they are still, usually over $100. So there is a need to explore whether the open access digital books are as effective as commercial or commercial digital content. Studies like this that have been done we're looking more at a traditional hard copy textbook versus the open access resources. As we know, students often struggle to afford textbooks. And again, more rationale, the digital textbooks have increased. If you have any questions, along the way, if there's something confusing, please feel free to, shout out or, raise your hand, whatever. So the research questions for our study, we wanted to look at the first one just really dealt with student performance. Was there a difference, in student performance when using a publisher's digital textbook versus the open access digital textbook? Number two, looked at the usage. Maybe students are using the, commercial digital book because they're paying for it more than the open access. That's the free one. Was there a difference there in usage? And then access, was it that some students, the open access book, maybe it was more accessible to the students. So we wanted to look at that. Where was there a difference in number three, the quality? So we just asked students in a survey, what book, how they rated their textbook that they used that particular semester. And then question number four was just overall textbook purchasing trends that we saw overall in all classes. We just asked the students a series of questions on a survey. Most of them were a Likert scale, just asking about some of the issues that they have or no issues. Just a couple of questions about that. So the context for this study, the population of students, the sample size was 164 students in a four-year college in the state of New York. Approximately 10,000 students are enrolled at the college. This particular course was an introductory biology course. That was another kind of difference in this study. There hasn't been too many studies looking at biology courses and using open access resources. So it used two sections during the 2024 spring semester. And then we used two sections of introductory biology courses during the 2025 semester. And I'll tell you in a little bit, when we used which book. So all sections were taught by the same instructor, the spring semesters, same course times, using the same teaching methods, same classroom. Okay, so the only variable that was changed was that type of digital textbook used. Okay, so this shows when we used each of the books. So during the 2024 spring semester, that's when we were using that commercial digital textbook. So what I mean by commercial, again, is that publisher's book that students paid for. It happened to be the book that we were using at the time. And we were talking about the department, that teaches this particular course. We were talking about eventually going to that open access textbook. So it was like a nice time to do a study. So I collected data. I collected the exam averages for 84 students. So some quantitative data and then qualitative data. I gave the students a survey at the end of the semester based on using that commercial, that book that they paid for, how they felt about it. And then again, just overall, trends, habits that they have when they purchase textbooks. During the spring 2025 semester, similar survey was used. We used, again, and for that semester, I kind of jumped ahead there. We used the free open access digital book. I'll tell you guys that I don't know if I'll mention this if I go to, do a publication, but we did use the OpenStax biology textbook. Some of you might be familiar with that. It was free resource. The students, could download it onto their computer. They could just click on a link and get the book that way as well. I took some quantitative data. The same exams were given to the students. And so I have the averages for those students, and basically the same survey was given as well. Okay, so to run these tests that I'm going to show you some of the results, we use some descriptives and inferential tests, some independent samples t-test. Those were for the test, the surveys that used a Likert scale, and some chi-square analyses for those questions that were basically like a yes and a no question. But most of the questions were based on a Likert scale. Okay, so research question number one, again, if you go back to remember, here we go, we got student performance. So that was there a difference in the way students performed when using this, expensive digital book versus the OER? And if you look at the p-values here, there was no significance. We took the exam averages for each exam, and there was no difference when using the commercial. Here's the averages for the exams. For the commercial and the OER. But our p-value showed us that it was not significant. The numbers were over, 0.05. So there was no significance. There was no difference in student performance when using these two types of books. The second question looked at use and access. So, we wanted to see if, for the commercial book, students have to, I guess after they purchase get the code and purchase the book, the OER is clicking on a link. The commercial book, maybe there's an extra step in there because they have to make sure they're logged in and, they're showing that they purchased the book. So there's a login code and password. So we wanted to see, was there a difference in the usage of the book and even the access of the book? So if you, look at the data, this is the percentages. So I'd focus on that. It does look like perhaps the students use the commercial book a couple of times a week. 33% said a couple of times a week. 16% of students said none. So it might look like, the commercial book, they were using it not as much. However, our independent samples t-test showed, again, this was based on a Likert scale. There was no significance. So there was no significance in the usage and the access. So you might think, like, okay, students maybe couldn't buy the textbook, so maybe they didn't have access to it. Well, the students found a way. They did buy the textbook, although you'll see in the survey that there is some, things that are happening, and there's some trends that we're seeing based on the textbook habits and what we saw in the study. But there was no significance, again, in the use and access when using the purchase commercial digital book versus the OER digital book. All right, so question number 3 looked at the quality. This one, there was significance here. The open access digital book had a better overall rating than the publisher's digital book. And it had a pretty large, a medium to large effect size. So we looked at the Cohen's d, and that was a pretty large effect size there. This is showing in the percent of students that rated the books excellent to terrible, Likert scale, and the OER book. There was a significant difference, and I know you might maybe not see it in the percentages. I mean, we can add them all up, but statistically, there's a difference here. And these open access books, they could be, students might, in this study it showed that they did like them, and we there's professors, instructors, experts in the fields that are writing these books that are helping to create them. And open access textbooks, specifically the OpenStax, they tend to be written really well, relating it to the student lives. So that could have something to do with it. I mean, that could be another, study looking at the differences in open access textbooks and why students might rate them better. But there was a pretty clear, significant difference. Students did prefer the quality better of the open access book. Okay. And then this was just general trends. It wasn't really focused on my course, on the course biology course. It wasn't focused on, anything to do with the open access books. It was just in general. So we asked a series of questions about how they felt about, buying books and some things that we're seeing when they're purchasing textbooks. And approximately 60% of students, so it's not on here, but there was 41% of students said that they didn't have any of these things. It was about 40% said they didn't. So this is the impact of textbook costs. So some students have reported, about 15% and 15% here, that they have taken fewer courses or not registered for a course because textbook costs were too high. I did have students, say that they dropped or withdrew from a course because they cannot afford the textbook. And I will mention there were like maybe one or two students in this study that, had a hard time buying that purchased that digital, publisher's book that we were using as a course. And, and I was able to get them free access for a couple of weeks. They could have maybe used library resources because we tend to have like a free resources available, like maybe one available. But, it could be that student dropped from my course because of that reason. But again, I don't know that reason. I should reach out to the student and see why they dropped. But anyway, there are students who say that they earned a poor grade or failed a course because textbook costs. And there were about 41% of students who did not purchase the textbook in general in their academic career because it was too expensive. So there was a section, a question, an answer that they can choose where none of the above. And only 40% of students put none of the above, that textbook costs had no impact. So about 60% of students reported that textbook costs had some sort of impact on their academic career. Some more trends here. So this was just in this academic year. So this specific 1 year where they took the survey, how often did they purchase required textbooks? So about 1/3, okay, if you look at these percentages here, 21 and 15, 1/3 of students rarely or sometimes purchase their required textbooks during that academic year. So there are students not buying the books. It could be affordability, not affordable to them, or maybe they feel like they can get by without the book. So we'll get to some of those discussion and implications now and what this is telling us, and you might be forming your own ideas of what this is telling us. But so again, this study looked at these commercial publisher digital textbooks. We're starting to use them a lot more now. A lot of professors, instructors are using these, again, publisher digital books. They're starting to push them a lot more. And we looked at the OER, the free digital textbooks. Again, there was no difference in performance. There was no difference in use and access. And then the quality, the OER, was statistically, it was preferred. It had a better rating. So, that's giving you some, ideas of what instructors may be considering open access resources, before adopting costly commercial digital textbooks. It's something that, should be considered and should be discussed with, your group of, instructors who are teaching that same course. Again, looking at just the general trends, it's telling us the same thing. Okay, about 60% of students reported that textbook costs had an effect on their academic career. Okay, a third of students rarely or sometimes purchased their required textbooks during one academic year. So, and this is just in other classes. Again, highlighting that, idea that we really should look into those open access resources. We should become more aware of what's available before adopting, other, costly digital books, especially if you're using a digital, book, a digital publisher's book. And this is specifically important, and we kind of talk about this in the paper a little bit more, but in colleges and universities that enroll a higher number of economically disadvantaged students, this should definitely be considered. So definitely think about, the resources that you're using. And, it doesn't hurt to try out the free resources for one semester and see how that goes. Okay, so yeah, that's it for my presentation. Thank you so much for listening, and I want to thank the SUNY OER Summit for allowing me to present, and also Farmingdale State College, for allowing me to do this type of research. And my email is posted, and I would love to take any questions if anyone has any questions. Thank you. I'm just reading in the chat. That's interesting, Zach. Thanks. Thanks, Zachary. I'm gonna check that out. Sure, Christina, if you want to email me, I can share the slides.
Christine, would you mind putting your email in the chat?
Sure. Yep.
Thank you. Just makes it easier for people to copy paste it.
Mm-hmm.
If anybody has any questions, feel free to come off mute and ask.
Oh, hi, Gregoria. Thank you.
Looks like
Thanks, everyone.
Christine asks, were these books just books or full course packs of resources with ancillary materials?
We were just using the books because that was going to be now like tough um, to use, other content because then, that's another variable being put in there. So it was really just textbook usage. What we did is we had students, I had in the syllabus what should be read at night. So I made reading a really big part of like the homework. And so they were supposed to read, parts, chapters for their reading for the night. So the chapters went with the curriculum. And both textbooks had the same, material as well, same topics in biology that we were covering.
And so the follow-up question.
Wasn't a courseware package. No, I wouldn't say it was a courseware package.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much for your presentation, Christine. We appreciate your time.
All right, thank you so much.